She found a baby in a box during a thunderstorm, wrapped in silk, wearing a billionaire's heirloom. Now the child's father thinks she's a kidnapper, but the truth is far more dangerous. Why did someone leave his son in her hands, and what secret was buried with the baby's real mother? Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. The rain had been falling for hours, turning the sidewalks slick and the gutters into rushing rivers. Naomi Reyes clutched her coat tighter around her as she stepped off her late shift at the cafe, her shoes already soaked through. It was nearly midnight, and the city had taken on that eerie hush, too quiet, too still, except for the echo of tires splashing through puddles and the low groan of thunder rolling across the sky. She reached the old bus stop near 8th and Juniper, the one with the rusted bench and flickering overhead light. It offered little shelter, but it was better than standing in open rain. She sighed, brushing her wet bangs out of her face, ready to scroll through her phone to pass the time. But then she heard it, a sound so soft it almost blended with the wind. A whimper. She froze. Again, a muffled cry, delicate, struggling. Her heart jumped. She turned slowly, eyes scanning the darkness. There, next to the trash can, a battered cardboard box, sagging from the moisture. Something inside it held the stomach of a boy who had lost more than just a leg. There was so much to learn. Naomi rushed forward. She dropped to her knees, ignoring the way the water soaked through her jeans. Her hands trembled as she pulled back the edge of the soggy lid. Inside was a baby, wrapped tightly in a thick pale blue designer blanket, face flushed and wet with tears. He couldn't have been more than a few months old. "Oh my God," Naomi whispered. The baby whimpered again, tiny fists waving in the damp air. She scanned the area. No stroller, no note, no sign of anyone nearby. Only the rain. She looked down at the child again, heart thudding. He was shivering now. His cheeks were cold, his lips tinged faintly blue. Without thinking, Naomi slipped off her coat and wrapped it around him. The blanket was fine and expensive soft, cashmere with an embroidered crest, definitely not something from a thrift store. Tucked near his neck was a small silver bracelet, delicate and engraved with the initials E. Naomi stared at it. The letters glinted even in the weak light. She glanced around again, praying someone would come running up, panicked, shouting for their lost child. But there was nothing, only shadows and the relentless fall of rain. She looked down at the infant in her arms. He was calmer now, eyes blinking slowly, his cries softening as she gently rocked him. "I can't leave you here," she murmured. "Not in this." She had no car, and the last bus of the night had already passed. Her apartment was a 15-minute walk, but she didn't hesitate. With one arm cradling the baby against her chest and the other gripping the soaked box to see if anything else had been left behind, Naomi turned into the storm and walked. When she reached her apartment, her clothes clung to her like second skin. She slipped inside, careful not to jostle the now sleeping child. Her place was small, just a studio with a kitchenette, a twin bed, and a space heater that buzzed more than it warmed, but it was dry and safe. She laid the baby on a folded towel on the bed and began drying him gently, then swaddled him in one of her old sweaters and placed the blanket beside him. She examined the bracelet again. Silver, finely made, with faint etching along the sides. Those initials nagged at her, tugging at the edge of recognition. After making sure he was warm and fed with the emergency formula she'd picked up from the corner store, Naomi picked up her phone. She hesitated. She couldn't call the police. She wasn't undocumented, but she wasn't far from it, just barely protected under temporary status while her paperwork processed. One wrong question, one wrong glance, and she could be deported. But she couldn't do nothing. So, she opened an email portal and reported the incident anonymously. Found baby, abandoned box, no suspect seen, safe and cared for. No name, no address. Just a silent plea that someone, somewhere, would do the right thing. She didn't sleep that night. By morning, the baby was still sleeping, curled up beside Naomi's pillow as though he belonged there. She hadn't moved all night, afraid even her breath might disturb him. But as sunlight filtered through her dingy blinds, reality crept in. She had someone else's child in her bed. Her life was already hanging by threads, barely enough tips to cover rent, double shifts at the diner, and a landlord who banged on doors more than he fixed plumbing. Now this? Naomi got up quietly and made oatmeal. The baby stirred as the scent reached him, his lashes fluttering. She smiled despite herself. "You've got cheeks like a dumpling," she whispered, scooping him gently into her arms. She didn't know what she was going to do, but she knew she wouldn't send him back into the world that left him in a box. She set him in the laundry basket she'd lined with blankets and tuned the small TV for background noise while she searched for formula recipes online. But the local news cut through her thoughts like a blade. Breaking story: Elijah Jameson's eye missing. Naomi froze. On screen, a handsome man in a gray suit stood before a cluster of microphones. Elijah Jameson, CEO of tech giant Virion Systems, billionaire, recluse, widower. His jaw was tight, voice clipped with grief. His son, Elias, disappeared sometime between midnight and 3 a.m. If anyone knows anything, added something aside, or exchanged a glance, allowing her to know that Elias was responsible. Having determined, Naomi's blood turned to ice. She looked at the baby, looked at the bracelet. Elijah Jameson. She stepped closer to the screen. The photo flashed Elias Jameson, born 4 months ago, same soft black hair, same dimpled chin, same silver bracelet. Her knees gave out and she sank to the floor. The baby wasn't abandoned. He was stolen. And now he was in her apartment. Naomi's breath came in short bursts. The police were probably already tracking tips, cameras, hospitals. She had brought him in last night. What if someone had seen her? What if the corner store clerk remembered her buying formula? She ran a hand through her tangled hair. Her reflection in the microwave looked like a stranger, pale, tired, terrified. The baby whimpered again, reaching for the blanket. Naomi stepped forward, picked him up, and held him tight. She couldn't give him up, not yet, not until she knew what really happened. Who left him there? Why? And if Elijah Jameson was the father, then who was the mother? She sat down slowly, rocking the baby in silence. "Who are you, little one?" she whispered, "and why were you left for me?" The TV droned on in the background, playing footage of Elijah walking past cameras, flanked by security. He looked hard, powerful, untouchable. But in his eyes, Naomi saw something else. Desperation. She stared at the screen until the news moved on. Then she stood, heart still pounding, and placed the baby in the makeshift crib. For now, she would protect him. But deep inside, she knew the truth was catching up. And when it did, nothing in her life would ever be the same again. By the 3rd day, the baby's fever wouldn't break. Naomi had tried everything: cool compresses, the recommended baby-safe meds from the pharmacy, rocking him through the night. But his cries grew weaker, his skin hotter. She didn't have health insurance, and taking him to a hospital meant risking exposure. But this wasn't about her anymore. He needed help. She wrapped him in a clean blanket, tucking his tiny bracelet inside his onesie so it wouldn't raise questions. Then she slipped on her hoodie, pulled the drawstring tight, and caught a rideshare to St. Jude's Memorial Hospital. Inside the ER, the nurse at triage took one look at the flushed infant and waved them past the line. Naomi whispered the name, Eli, careful not to say too much. A doctor swooped in, nodding at her brief explanation of high fever, 3 days, found abandoned, while scribbling notes and rushing the baby into a pediatric bay. Naomi hovered outside the curtain, chewing her nail raw. Minutes passed like hours. Then came the nurse. She looked at Naomi with a strange mixture of sympathy and tension. "You said he was abandoned?" Naomi nodded slowly. The nurse hesitated, then said, Stay here." Naomi's stomach sank. A half-hour later, the curtain flung open, not by a doctor, but by a man in a dark navy coat and steel-gray eyes that burned with fury. "Elijah Jameson," the nurse said stiffly, as though announcing royalty. Naomi's heart stuttered. She backed up instinctively. He walked straight to the bassinet, where the baby, cleaned, medicated, and hooked to monitors, lay sleeping. Elijah reached down with shaking fingers, brushing the baby's cheek. His jaw clenched, as though holding back a scream. Then he turned to Naomi. "You have exactly 10 seconds to tell me what you did with my son." Naomi froze. I didn't do anything to him. I found him at a bus stop." "Don't lie to me," he snapped, voice like a whip. "He was gone for 3 days, and suddenly you show up with him at a hospital? You think I believe that's a coincidence?" She stepped back again, her voice rising. "I didn't take him. I swear to God. I found him in a cardboard box. No note, no one around." He was crying. Elijah advanced a step, but the nurse stepped between them. "Sir, please, we'll handle this in private." But she brought him in. That baby had a 103-degree fever. She didn't hurt him. Elijah looked between them, his eyes scanning Naomi as if searching for guilt, deceit, anything to explain the unexplainable. "Did you know to come here?" Naomi asked quietly. He pulled something from his pocket, a security photo, grainy but unmistakable. Naomi's face on a hospital camera. He flagged every ER in the state. Someone recognized the bracelet. "You didn't hide it well." Naomi looked down at her hands. "I wasn't trying to hide him. I just didn't want him taken into the system. I thought maybe his parents—" Elijah's face twisted. "His mother is dead." Tet hit her like a slap. I didn't know." "You didn't bother to ask," he said coldly. Before she could respond, a second nurse entered. "Sir, the paternity results came back. He's yours, 99.99%. Elijah closed his eyes, just for a moment. Then he turned to security. "Take him to the neonatal suite, and bring her with us." Naomi blinked. "What? Why?" "Because I want answers," he said, his voice dangerously low. "And until I get them, you're not going anywhere." The black SUV that picked Naomi up from the hospital looked like something out of a government convoy. Tinted windows, silent driver, interior leather that smelled like power and precision. She sat stiffly, clutching her purse to her chest while the baby, Elias, she had to remind herself, slept in a temperature-controlled bassinet beside her. Elijah Jameson sat across from her, silent. His jaw was clenched, his hands folded neatly, but his eyes never left her. Not for a second. "You say you found him," he said finally, "but you didn't report it through legal channels." Elena laughed. Naomi said, anonymously. "I didn't trust what would happen if the system got involved. Babies don't always end up safe, and He cut her off. "You mean you didn't want to get caught?" She said, sharper this time. "I didn't want him to get lost in paperwork while someone figured out if I was worth listening to." A flicker of something passed across his face, surprise, maybe, or grudging recognition. They pulled through iron gates into the private drive of a sprawling estate on the city's northern edge. Naomi stared out the window. Stunned marble columns, stone fountains, and a circular driveway lined with hedges sculpted like swans. This was his world? Security led them inside. She didn't resist. The baby was still sick, and she'd go wherever he went. They passed polished floors and towering walls hung with abstract art, until finally they entered a quiet guest suite at the end of a long hall. "This will be yours until the investigation is complete," Elijah said flatly. "There are cameras, guards at every exit. Don't mistake this for trust." Naomi exhaled shakily, setting her bag down on the velvet armchair. "I didn't ask for your trust," she murmured. "Just a chance to prove I'm not who you think I am." "You're a stranger with my son," he said coldly. "That's all I need to know." She didn't answer. What was there to say? The door closed behind him, leaving her in silence with the baby, who stirred softly in the crib beside her. Naomi knelt, brushing her fingers gently over his downy hair. "You're back where you belong," she whispered. The teeth whispered. But even as she said it, her chest ached. She didn't belong here, and yet she couldn't leave. Later that night, dinner was brought to her room on a silver tray. More food than she could eat in a week. She barely touched it. The baby's fever had dropped, and the doctor on call came in quietly to check him again. "He's stable now," the woman said gently. "Whoever took care of him saved his life." Naomi swallowed hard but said nothing. Just past midnight, she heard soft footsteps in the hall. A shadow moved past the frosted glass. Then came the creak of a door down the corridor. She peeked out. Elijah stood alone in the hallway, staring through the tall window at the night. His hands were in his pockets, his face unreadable. He looked less like a titan of tech and more like a man who hadn't slept in days. Naomi didn't speak. She simply watched. For the first time, she realized something. He wasn't just angry. He was broken. And she was now living in the mansion of the man who thought she'd stolen his only reason to survive. Naomi didn't sleep much that night, not because of the baby, who now rested peacefully in a crib that probably cost more than her yearly rent, but because of the silence. It was too still in the mansion, too controlled. She was used to creaky floors, paper-thin walls, the occasional thump of neighbors' arguments or late-night TV. Here, everything was muted, clinical. The next morning, Elijah didn't knock. He entered with a folder in one hand and a cold look in his eyes. "I'm offering you a contract," he said flatly, setting the folder on the desk. 6 weeks. You remain on the property as Elias's primary caregiver. You'll be monitored at all times. If you violate the terms of this NDA, he tapped the legal packet, you'll face prosecution. Naomi stood by the crib, arms folded. "So I'm your prisoner, but with a paycheck?" Elijah's jaw tensed. "You're a civilian with unknown motives in possession of my son. This is the safest option for both of you until the investigation ends." She stepped closer, her voice even. "You think I had something to do with his disappearance?" "People lie, especially when they want something." Naomi looked down at Elias. He cooed softly in his sleep, his fingers curled around the edge of the blanket. Her heart tugged. "I want him to be safe," she said quietly. "That's it." Elijah didn't respond. Instead, he handed her a pen. She signed. By mid-afternoon, Naomi had moved from the guest room to a nursery suite with its own kitchenette and balcony. It was beautiful, lavender walls, plush rugs, sunlight streaming through linen drapes. But Naomi felt no comfort. She was being watched. Security cameras dotted the corners. A monitor screen outside the door blinked every time she moved. Even the housekeeper who brought in folded laundry never made eye contact. Naomi's only anchor was Elias. She fed him, changed him, rocked him until he fell asleep against her shoulder. The more time she spent with him, the more she noticed little things. Things that didn't sit right. How he flinched at sudden noises. Or how his cries sharpened when men entered the room. He'd grown attached to her quickly, not in the way a baby usually did. It was needier, more desperate. As though comfort was a stranger he didn't trust would return. Naomi said nothing at first, but every day, as she soothed him, she began to wonder. What had happened to him before he ended up in that box? One evening, she passed Elijah in the hallway. He paused mid-call, watching as she bounced Elias on her hip. "He cries less now," he observed. Naomi nodded. "He's learning to feel safe." Elijah looked at her, something unreadable behind his eyes. He shouldn't have had to. Naomi wanted to ask, but the wall between them was still too high. Later, she sat in the rocking chair and hummed a lullaby. As she tucked Elias in, the blanket he'd been left with at the bus stop fell to the floor. She bent to pick it up, and something slipped out. A torn photograph folded tightly. Naomi stared at it. It was just a sliver of an image, faded, curled at the edges, but she could make out half a woman's face. Dark hair, a soft smile, eyes that looked hauntingly familiar. She turned it over. No name, no date. Just the word always. She held it in trembling fingers. Elijah had never mentioned this photo. Never mentioned anyone other than his late wife. So who was the woman in the picture? And why had it been hidden in the folds of a baby blanket? Naomi didn't sleep. She kept the torn photo on the nightstand, unable to stop glancing at it. The woman's features were so partially obscured that it was hard to tell anything definitive, that she didn't match the photos in the press articles about Elijah's late wife, Marissa Hale Jameson. Marissa had been blonde, sharp-jawed, always perfectly posed in charity gala photos with Elijah. This woman? Softer. The smile in the picture was warm, almost maternal. So why had this image been hidden? The next morning, Naomi cautiously approached one of the nursery staff. "Can I ask you something?" she said in a low voice, cradling Elias. The woman, middle-aged, eyes kind but wary. "Before the baby disappeared," Naomi said, "was there a nanny?" The woman hesitated. "There was..." But she laughed suddenly, just before everything. "Who is her name?" "I'm not allowed to say, I'm sorry." Naomi nodded, heart racing. She had to be careful. If Elijah got wind she was asking questions, he might revoke the contract, or worse, take the baby away again. But the more time she spent here, the more obvious it became, not everything added up. That evening, Elijah requested a meeting in the conservatory. She arrived to find him seated at the piano, fingers hovering over the keys. He didn't look up. "I used to play when I was young," he said, "before everything became numbers." Naomi stayed silent. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." She did. He looked at her, expression unreadable. "The investigators reviewed the CCTV around the bus stop. There's nothing. No one dropping him off, no cars, no clues. Just you, finding him." "What are you doing away from home?" she said gently. "But maybe someone knew I would be there." He narrowed his eyes. Naomi braved the next words. "Did your wife, Marissa, have any enemies?" Elijah flinched, just slightly. "She drowned in a boating accident," he said, his voice clipped. "She was alone. It was ruled an accident." "Elias?" Naomi asked, her tone gentle. "He was with her?" There was a pause. Then Elijah's voice softened, just enough to sound human again. "He wasn't supposed to be." Naomi waited. "To the yacht out for air. I told her not to go. The waters were rough, but she took him anyway. When they found the wreckage, she was gone. He was, somehow, still in the cabin, wet but alive." His hand clenched into a fist on the piano lid. "It was reckless," he whispered. "But she loved him." Naomi looked down. Sometimes, love and recklessness live too close together. There was a long silence between them. That night, Naomi returned to her room and took out the torn photo again. She stared at it under the lamp. The woman in the picture didn't resemble Marissa. But she did resemble someone. Elias. The shape of the eyes, the curve of the smile. Naomi's stomach turned. What if the woman in the photo wasn't Marissa, but someone else entirely? And what if Elias' real mother wasn't who Elijah believed it was? The thought was wild, dangerous. But the way this family kept secrets, Naomi wouldn't be surprised if the truth had been buried deeper than a broken photo. She folded the picture again, tucking it back inside the blanket where she'd found it. She couldn't confront Elijah yet. Not until she had more answers. But she knew this much. The past wasn't resting in peace. And the real story of who this baby belonged to had only just begun. Rain clung to the windows like tears as Naomi stood at the cafe counter, pouring espresso into a to-go cup with trembling hands. It had been nearly 3 weeks since she signed Elijah's contract, since she became a caretaker cloaked in suspicion. Now, on her first allowed day off, accompanied by one of Elijah's silent drivers, she had come to her old workplace for a sliver of normal. The bell above the door jingled as a woman entered, her beige coat soaked, and her dark curls flattened by the rain. Naomi glanced up and froze. There was something familiar about her eyes. "Naomi Cruz?" the woman asked softly. She nodded. The woman stepped forward. I was Elias's nanny before the accident. Before the night, everything changed. Naomi's heart slammed into her ribs. Why are you here? The woman's voice lowered. Because I've seen your face on the news and I thought, maybe you don't know the whole truth either. Naomi moved from behind the counter. Please, sit. Tell me. The woman hesitated, glancing around the cafe as if someone might be watching. Then she leaned in close. Issa Jameson wasn't the woman the tabloids made her out to be. And Elijah? He's not the only one with secrets behind those gates. Naomi's breath hitched. What kind of secrets? She was scared. She told me someone had threatened her, a man from her past. Someone Elijah didn't know about. A photo appeared in her mailbox the week before she took that yacht out. I never saw what was in it, but she looked like she'd seen a ghost. Naomi blinked. You think she was running from something? The woman gave a bitter smile. No, I think she was preparing for something, maybe even planning to disappear. Naomi felt her blood run cold. Then the boat went down, the nanny whispered, and the next morning I was fired. NDA shoved in my hand, told to leave quietly or face consequences. Naomi felt like the floor was shifting beneath her. Why come to me now? Because you're the only one who's looked at Elias like he's more than a headline. Be careful, Naomi. There are people who want this story buried, and they have the money to make it happen. Then, without another word, the woman stood and slipped out the door, vanishing into the storm. Naomi stood still for several minutes, heart pounding. That night, back at the mansion, she paced her room while Elias napped, the weight of the conversation pressing down on her. What if Elijah didn't know everything? What if Elias hadn't just been lost, but taken? And then returned? The baby's whimper pulled her out of her spiral. Thunder cracked outside, and his cries grew louder. She rushed to pick him up, holding him close, rocking him gently near the window. It's okay, she whispered. It's just noise. You're safe. Another thunderclap made him bury his face against her shoulder, tiny fingers gripping her sweater. She sang softly. Not words, just melody. Something soothing, something she wished someone had done for her when the world was loud and scary and unfair. In the doorway, Elijah stood, watching. She didn't notice at first, too focused on the baby's quivering body, but when she turned to adjust the curtain, her eyes met his. He said nothing. His face was unreadable, except for the sheen of guilt that hovered beneath his eyes. Naomi didn't ask how long he'd been standing there, and he didn't explain. Instead, he simply said, "Thank you," twice. Janice turned and walked away. Later that night, Naomi sat on the edge of her bed, with Elias asleep in the crib beside her. Her mind spun with fragments of stories, the nanny's warning, the torn photograph, Elijah's cold silences and fleeting moments of vulnerability. Something was deeply broken inside this house, not just emotionally, but structurally. As if the foundation of every truth here was built on lies. She opened her old phone, one of the few items she'd kept hidden from Elijah's team. It didn't connect to Wi-Fi here, but it still held every text, voicemail, and contact from her past life, before the mansion, She scrolled through her gallery, looking at old photos of her parents, of the cafe during closing shifts, of the baby's first bath in her apartment sink. She had taken that one the night after she found him, his tiny body wrapped in towels, his eyes squinting against. She paused. The blanket. She had used the designer blanket that night, the one with the initials E. But in this photo, there was no blanket. Her pulse quickened. Had she taken another photo earlier, one before she wrapped him? She searched harder, fingers trembling, and then her phone buzzed. A message from a private number. No name, just a text. You're not the first to hold him. Naomi froze. A second message followed, this time a photo. The image loaded slowly, each pixel sharpening until the truth punched through her like a storm surge. It was Elias, but not in her arms. He was in someone else's. A woman, Dark hair, youthful eyes, a gentle smile, held the baby in a dimly lit room. There was a bruise on her wrist and fear in her eyes, but she cradled Elias like he was the only thing she had left in the world. Naomi stared. The baby wore the same bracelet, the same faint birthmark on his shoulder. There was no mistaking it. This was before Naomi had found him. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m., the night before the bus stop. Naomi's vision blurred. Someone had him before she did. Someone who hadn't taken him to a hospital. Someone who vanished. Was she the last stop in a desperate chain of hands? She clutched the phone, heart pounding so hard it felt like thunder inside her chest. She didn't know who sent the photo. But someone was watching her. And someone wanted her to know. This story had shadows far deeper than she'd imagined. And the gates around this mansion weren't just keeping her in. They were keeping something out. Or trying to. She rushed to the hallway, needing to tell someone, Elijah, maybe, but stopped short when she saw a door ajar at the far end. Faint light spilled out. She crept closer. Inside was Elijah's study, dimly lit by the glow of monitors. He sat alone, shoulders hunched, replaying security footage. Frame by frame, the timestamp crawled back toward the night of the storm, the night she found Elias. Naomi stepped back quietly, heart aching. He was chasing answers too, but he was chasing the wrong direction. Because the real question wasn't just how Elias ended up in that box. It was why someone had wanted him gone. And who might come looking for him next? As she returned to her room, locking the door behind her, Naomi whispered a silent promise to the child asleep in the crib. "I'll protect you," she said, "even if I have to burn every secret in this house to the ground." Naomi waited until Elias was asleep before walking down the corridor toward Elijah's private office. The mansion was quieter now, but not peaceful, more like a storm waiting to crack open. She clutched her phone tightly, the photo still fresh in her mind. That woman, that timestamp, that baby. She didn't knock. She walked in. Elijah looked up from his desk, startled. "Something wrong?" Naomi said, her voice firm. "You need to tell me the truth." He closed his laptop slowly. "I've already told you everything I know." She stepped forward. "No, you haven't. Who is the woman in this photo?" She showed him her phone. His eyes locked on the image and widened. Elijah stood abruptly, face pale. "Where did you get this?" "She's holding Elias," Naomi said. "But it's not your wife, is it?" He looked away, jaw clenched. Naomi's voice dropped. "Is she the one who gave birth to him?" Elijah turned toward the window. Her name was Sabrina. Naomi froze. "In a way's younger sister," he said. "They were close growing up, but she disappeared before Elias was born. No one's seen her since." Naomi felt her breath catch. "Marissa, my wife, claims Sabrina was mentally unstable. She said she ran off and refused help, but something never added up. I always suspected." He trailed off. "Suspected what?" Naomi demanded. "Paranoid, pursued by Elias's biological mother," he said quietly. "And that Marissa might have covered it up." Naomi stared at him, reeling. Why would she do that? She couldn't have children of her own. We tried. Failed. It nearly broke her. He turned to Naomi. "And Sabrina was young, naive. Marissa said she took care of everything, that Sabrina had signed the papers. But I never saw them. Then the accident happened, and Elias was all I had left." Naomi's heart pounded. "You think I had something to do with her disappearance?" "I don't know what to think," he admitted. "You showed up with my son and a lie, and now this photo?" Naomi backed away. "I saved him, Elijah. I've only ever tried to protect him." He looked at her, eyes conflicted. "I believe you care about him. That much is clear." A sharp metallic crash echoed from upstairs. They froze. Then came the unmistakable sound of glass shattering. "Elijah," Naomi whispered. He moved fast, bolting for the hallway. Naomi followed, heart racing as they climbed the staircase toward the nursery. The door was open, Curtains flapped in the wind. A figure darted through the shadows, but before Naomi could scream, Elijah lunged. A scuffle erupted near the crib. Naomi rushed to Elias, scooping him up just as he stirred in confusion. The figure shoved Elijah back and disappeared through the open window, vanishing into the night. Elijah leaned against the wall, breathing hard. "Are you okay?" Naomi nodded shakily, holding Elias close. I think so." He checked the crib, untouched. The window pried open. Whoever it was hadn't come for money. They came for the baby. Later, after the police had swept the grounds and Elijah secured the mansion with extra guards, Naomi and Elijah sat in the den, the baby asleep between them. "More secrets," Naomi said softly. "If we're going to protect him, I need to know everything." Elijah nodded. "Then come with me tomorrow. There's one place we haven't searched. Sabrina rented a storage unit years ago, under her middle name. I had it flagged in our old records but never followed up. What changed?" He looked at Naomi. "You?" The next morning, Naomi barely spoke, as Elijah drove them across the city in a sleek black SUV. Elias was safe at the estate with a trusted nanny Elijah had known since childhood, and 2 armed guards now shadowed every step. But Naomi still felt a chill in her chest that no seatbelt could anchor. They pulled into a quiet industrial lot surrounded by chain-link fencing and rows of faded blue storage units. Elijah led the way to Unit 143, fumbling slightly with the key. The lock clicked. When the door creaked upward, the stale air rushed out, thick with dust and the scent of something forgotten. Inside, it wasn't cluttered, it was deliberate. A rocking chair, a folded crib, a baby bag embroidered with the initials S.M. Naomi walked in slowly, her steps hushed on the concrete. Then she saw it, against the far wall, a stack of labeled plastic bins, each one marked in a tidy scrawl. Prenatal appointments. Letters to E. Journal. She picked up the last one, her throat tightening as she opened it. Inside were spiral-bound notebooks, sticky notes, drawings. Dozens of pages all handwritten by a woman trying to preserve something she wasn't allowed to keep. Naomi flipped through them. Some entries were joyful, others terrified. "Told me I'd never see him again, but I felt him kick. He knows me. I know it. Marissa said it was better this way. She said he would never accept me if he knew." Naomi froze. "Elijah," she whispered, "you need to read this." He moved beside her, expression unreadable as he read page after page. Then he reached down, picked up a smaller object from beneath the journal. A camera. Naomi stared. It was a compact camcorder, the kind that recorded on internal memory. They looked at each other in silence. Elijah powered it on. The small screen flickered, loading a file. A date appeared, 6 days before Elias was born. And then, Sabrina's face filled the frame. She looked tired, tearful. Her voice shook. "You're seeing this. I don't know what happened to me. Maybe they were right and I was unstable. Or maybe I finally got away. But I need to say this while I still can. Elias is mine, and I love him." Her hand moved protectively to her belly. "They told me I had no right, that I should be grateful for the money. But a mother's love isn't a transaction, it's survival. I didn't sign those papers. I never would." Elijah dropped into the chair, stunned, and received her own heaven-sent aftermath. Marissa said Elijah needed a child, that she couldn't lose him. But I never agreed to disappear. The screen went black. Naomi's breath trembled. She didn't vanish by choice. Olivia said hoarsely. She was erased. He rubbed his eyes, and I let it happen. I let Marissa control everything. Naomi placed a hand on his shoulder. "You were grieving and deceived. That doesn't make you guilty, but what you do now, that matters." He looked up at her, something changing behind his gaze. "Resolve. We go public," he said. "We release this video. Clear your name, tell the truth. All of it." Naomi hesitated. That's dangerous. My mind was a street. A silence didn't protect her. It won't protect Elias either. She nodded. But even as they stepped out of the unit, video and journal in hand, Naomi felt something shift around them. As if someone, somewhere, was already watching. And if Marissa had gone to such lengths to hide the truth, there was no telling how far someone else might go to bury it again. The video spread through Elijah's legal team like wildfire, then quietly through the halls of truth. Naomi hadn't expected the silence that followed. No statements, no headlines, just a stillness, as if the world were waiting for someone, anyone, to breathe. But Elijah didn't hesitate. He gave the footage to his lawyers and instructed them to file for posthumous investigation of Marissa Jameson. There were murmurs of scandal, legacy, disgrace, but he didn't flinch. Let them talk, he told Naomi. She buried too many lives in silence. I won't let hers be the last word. It was later that evening, after Elias had fallen asleep in Naomi's arms, that she sat across from Elijah in the solarium, the rain streaking gently across the glass above them. She turned to him, unsure how to speak what had been growing in her chest. First he came into the cafe, Naomi whispered. Elijah looked up. Who? Sabrina, she said, her voice catching. I didn't realize it until I saw her in the video. She used a fake name, Lena. Came every Thursday, always asked for chamomile tea and extra lemon. She'd sit by the window, writing in this little red notebook. Elijah leaned forward, absorbing every word. She watched me play with kids, talk to the elderly regulars. She always smiled when I held babies. She knew. Watching, Elijah said softly. She knew she wouldn't be around, and she wanted to leave him with someone who would love him. Naomi swallowed. That's why she left him at the diner. It wasn't random. She trusted me. Elijah looked like he might break apart, his fingers curled into fists. I should have known. I should have seen it. Naomi reached across the table, covering his hand gently. You weren't looking for betrayal, Elijah. You were just trying to hold your life together. He looked at her, and for the first time, the steel in his eyes softened. You still see good in people after all this? Have to, Naomi said. It's the only thing that's kept me breathing. Logan looked at her. Their brothers aside? They sat in silence, warmth blooming between them. Later that week, Elijah invited her into his personal study. It wasn't a room she'd seen before. Unlike the rest of the pristine estate, it was raw, full with stacks of half-finished letters, old vinyl records, even sketches of the mansion before it had been remodeled into luxury. I built this place, he said, to prove I was more than a trust fund. I thought I could buy meaning, sculpt identity. But the more I added, the more I lost myself. Naomi watched as he crossed the room and pulled a drawer open. Inside was a small box. He handed it to her. When she opened it, a weathered locket lay inside. Inside was a photo of a woman, Elijah's mother, and next to her, a much younger Elijah. He was the only one who saw me, he said. Before the boardrooms, before the headlines. Naomi touched the locket gently. And now? His voice barely rose above a whisper. Now, you do too. Naomi looked at him, heart aching. There was something beautiful about the way he said it, like a confession, like a promise. The moment might have lingered longer had her phone not buzzed with a new email. She glanced at the screen and froze. He looked over. What is it? She swallowed hard. It's from immigration. They're auditing the cafe. He straightened. What? Naomi's voice trembled. They're claiming I violated employment protocols. If they find irregularities, they could shut it down. Naomi stood in the kitchen, phone still clutched in her hand, as if letting go would somehow make the email vanish. The cafe wasn't just her livelihood, it was her mother's legacy, her sanctuary, her only way of surviving before Elias entered her life. Elijah took the phone from her gently, reading the message in silence. Then he set it down and met her eyes. You're targeting you, he said, his voice low, tight. It's retaliation. Someone doesn't want the truth about Sabrina getting out. Naomi nodded slowly. Maybe a board member, Or someone from Marissa's family. Doesn't matter who, he said. I'll fight it. Elijah, she started, but he stepped closer, his presence grounding. Don't. You've been fighting alone for too long. Let me carry some of it now. Naomi's breath hitched, her defenses worn thin by months of fear and fractured truth. She leaned into him without thinking, resting her forehead against his chest, his arms wrapped around her instinctively, like they'd done it 1,000 times before. In the silence that followed, only the faint sound of Elias's soft breathing through the baby monitor filled the room. Later that night, Naomi found herself in her old cafe, lights dimmed, cleaning counters not because they were dirty, but because she needed something steady, something hers. She stared at the pictures pinned behind the register, smiling patrons, old recipes, notes from customers who called her family. And then her eyes landed on a face. Sabrina, or Lena, as she'd once introduced herself, smiling softly, Elias's baby bump barely visible under her apron in the photo. Naomi had forgotten they'd taken that picture together after closing early one rainy Thursday. She took the photo down with shaking hands. Sabrina had trusted her when the world turned cruel. Now Naomi had to live up to it. The next morning, Naomi and Elijah met with his legal team. He'd already arranged for a pro bono immigration defense attorney, sharp, relentless, and with a passion for small business owners. We'll argue that the cafe is a protected community space, the lawyer explained, and that the audit is retaliatory. I've already filed the injunction. Naomi blinked. That fast? Elijah glanced at her. I don't wait when someone threatens my family. The word hung there. Family. He didn't take it back. That night, after Elias fell asleep in Naomi's arms once again, she stepped outside into the cool breeze of the back terrace. The stars were faint above the city haze, but she looked up anyway. Elijah joined her moments later. They stood side by side in the quiet. This is over, he said. What do you want? Naomi thought for a long moment. I want to run the cafe without fear, she said. I want Elias to grow up never questioning whether he was wanted. She looked at Elijah then, eyes deep with a gentleness he hadn't seen since his mother passed. I want to be more than a footnote in someone else's story. Elijah reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her heart stopped. He opened it, not to reveal a ring, but a necklace, a delicate gold chain with a single charm. To a new leader, he said. Not Lena, not caretaker, not accused, just Naomi. She didn't answer right away. She only lifted her hand, touching the necklace as though it burned with a memory. Then she smiled, soft and real. The first time in a long time, I think I finally remember who that is. But just as the stillness settled, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't immigration. It was a message from an unknown number. Deared. You think the truth's out. It isn't. Sabrina lied to you both. Meet me where she left the child, alone. The knock came just after dawn. Naomi opened the door to find Elijah standing there in a crisp navy suit, his expression unreadable. Behind him, the hallway stretched long and quiet, but the tension between them filled every inch of space. Elijah? She asked, voice thick with sleep and confusion. What is it? He took a breath. We need to talk. About guardianship, about you, about Elias. She stepped aside, heart already racing. He paced once across the room before stopping at the edge of the rug, his eyes locking with hers. The legal team's latest update came through last night, he began. Because of the audit and questions around your immigration paperwork, the state is threatening to place Elias in temporary foster care. Naomi gasped, clutching the edge of the couch for balance. No, they can't. He has us. Unless, Elijah said slowly, we make guardianship formal, immediate. How do we do that? She asked, dread blooming in her chest. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Inside, a notarized document and a single piece of folded paper. Marriage license, he said gently. It would give us joint guardianship. The audit would lose power. They'd have no reason to separate Elias from the only mother he's known. Naomi stared at it like it was a piece of burning coal. "You're asking me to marry you to solve a legal mess." "Protect Elias," he corrected. "And yes, partly to help the cafe. I can settle the audit under my name, make it disappear." She took a step back. "That's not a proposal. That's a contract with a vow." His jaw tightened. "Naomi, I'm not pretending this is a love story, but I care about him, about you, and this keeps him safe." Her mind raced. Everything about it felt wrong. Her parents had married out of convenience, depth, and desperation, dressed as affection. She'd sworn she'd never do the same. But this wasn't just about pride anymore. It was about Elias. A knock came again. This time it was Mara, the journalist Naomi remembered from a past charity event, now carrying a flash drive and a folder. "I've been digging into the trust tied to the child's inheritance," she said quickly, "and I found something." They sat at the table, Mara laying out documents. Elias's birth mother, Sabrina, was the rightful heir to a sizable estate, but it was set up to activate only if the father took full custody. Someone tried to ensure that couldn't happen by eliminating any connection between Elias and the child. Naomi blinked. "You think someone paid to have Sabrina disappear? Or scared her into hiding," Mara said. "That bracelet? It wasn't just an heirloom, it was a marker of lineage." Elijah sat back slowly, eyes narrowing. "Then marrying Naomi won't just protect the child. It'll give us time to expose whoever manipulated the trust." Mara nodded. "But the press won't wait. If you two do this, make it public. Make it clear it's not for money, it's for Elias." Naomi held the folder in her hands, staring at the photos and the redacted letters inside. Her heart twisted with the weight of it all. She looked up at Elijah. "We do this under one condition." He raised an eyebrow. "Name it." "We protect Elias, we expose the truth, and we don't lie to him about any of it." His answer came without hesitation. "Deal." The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and fresh wax, its beige walls lined with rows of wooden benches and metal detectors. Naomi sat in the small waiting room, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed the ivory blouse Mara had insisted she wear. Across from her, Elijah signed the final documents with his usual calm, though a flicker of tension hid behind his dark eyes. Elias sat between them in his stroller, clutching a stuffed bunny that Naomi had stitched back together after his first night at the mansion. He had no idea what this day meant for him, or for them. The clerk called their names. They stepped into the small courtroom, hushed and sterile, where a retired judge conducted brief civil ceremonies. It was quiet, save for the shuffle of papers and the judge's low voice asking for consent. Naomi's heart pounded as the words "marriage of legal partnership" passed between them. The moment felt unreal, like playing a role she hadn't auditioned for. But when she looked at Elias, his eyes wide and trusting, she felt her spine straighten. She whispered. The judge nodded. "Do you, Elijah Jameson, take Naomi Reyes as your lawful spouse?" Naomi swallowed hard. "I do." "You may exchange rings if you wish." They didn't. Instead, Elijah reached for her hand and gently slid a silver bracelet Elias's own around her wrist. A quiet nod between them sealed the vow. "By the power vested in me." The doors to the courtroom burst open. Everyone turned. A woman stepped forward, late 30s, raven-maid, wearing a sharp burgundy coat and clutching a leather briefcase. Her voice was crisp, but the fire in her eyes said she wasn't here for formality. "I represent a client who claims blood relation to the child and intends to file for emergency guardianship," she said, walking toward the bench. "This marriage may be invalid if performed under false pretenses, to circumvent a custody dispute." Naomi's stomach dropped. The judge raised a brow. "On what grounds?" "Where does the woman go?" The woman held up a birth certificate. "My client is named in this document, Sabrina Alcott's half-sister. Filled emotion this morning." Elijah stepped forward. "What is this?" "Your wife wasn't the only Alcott heir," the woman said calmly. "And this other relative believes your child was hidden to keep her from inheritance rights tied to the family trust." Naomi's knees weakened. She grasped the edge of the bench, steadying herself. She could see the confusion flickering in Elijah's eyes, genuine, shaken. The judge looked between them. Then this marriage is not void, but guardianship will require a hearing. A child's welfare cannot be toyed with. Elias whimpered. Naomi scooped him up, pressing him against her chest. His tiny body calmed at her heartbeat, but hers wouldn't stop racing. Elijah placed a firm hand on the judge's desk, said the hearing. We'll be there, and until then, Elias stays with us. The judge hesitated, then nodded. Temporary custody remains unchanged until further notice. The gavel struck, and it was done, for now. But as they stepped into the cold afternoon light outside the courthouse, Naomi's grip on Elias tightened. A shadow now loomed over everything. The marriage, the trust, the safety she thought they'd secured. It was all at risk again. Elijah stood beside her, jaw clenched, his voice low. We'll fight this, together. Naomi nodded. For Elias, no matter what. But deep inside, a question echoed in her mind. Who else knew the baby's secret before she did? The courtroom was still. A hush settled over the gallery as the judge glanced between the opposing parties. Naomi held Elias tightly in her lap, his tiny fingers wrapped around the edge of her blazer. Elijah sat beside them, his arm just barely brushing hers. They hadn't spoken much that morning. Too many stakes to weigh, too many emotions fighting for. Across the aisle, the woman in the burgundy coat, the one who had interrupted their wedding, stood poised, her briefcase on the table. Her client, a gaunt man in his 40s, stared coldly ahead, claiming to be the half-brother of Sabrina Alcott, Elijah's late wife. Inheritance clause, the man's lawyer stated, clearly stipulates that should any biological child be proven illegitimate or unaccounted for, it passes to the next legal heir. The judge leaned forward. And you claim the child was never legally acknowledged? Correct, Your Honor. Therefore, my client seeks full custody, not for guardianship, but to ensure his rightful claim to the estate. Gasps fluttered through the audience. Naomi's heart pounded. It wasn't just about Elias anymore. It was about erasing his identity, erasing the mother who left him in Naomi's arms, erasing everything they'd survived. Then, Mara stood. Her heels clicked against the tile floor as she approached the bench. In her hand, she held a small black flash drive. Permission to present new evidence, Your Honor, she said. The judge nodded. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as a screen flickered on. The video began to play. A young woman, tired but radiant, sat in what looked like a small storage room. Her face was familiar. Eerily so. She looked like a Brivga, but softer, gentler. "My name is Sophia Alcock," she said into the camera. "I'm not supposed to exist publicly. Sabrina made sure of that. But this baby? He's mine, and he deserves better than the world we grew up in." Naomi clutched Elias closer. He gurgled softly, as if recognizing the voice. Sophia continued, her voice cracking. "If something happens to me, I want Naomi to have him." She smiled at me the first time I walked into her cafe. She didn't judge me. She brought me tea when I was too scared to ask for help. She made me believe someone like me could still be a mother, even if only for a little while. The video ended. The silence that followed was heavy with realization. The judge turned toward the challenger. "This testimony, combined with medical and social records, disqualifies your claim. This court recognized Elias Alcott Reyes Jameson as the rightful heir and child of guardianship under Naomi Reyes and Elijah Jameson." Naomi's breath caught in her throat. She blinked back tears. "Elijah Jameson," the judge continued, "do you wish to legally adopt the child as your own?" Elijah stood. "I do." "You know immediately? Do you accept permanent guardianship, with all rights and responsibilities therein?" Naomi's voice trembled. "Yes, with all my heart." The gavel struck. It was done. Inside the courthouse, snow drifted gently from the sky, blanketing the steps in a soft, white hush. Naomi stepped out into the chill with Elias bundled close against her chest. Elijah followed behind her, his coat flapping slightly in the breeze, but his eyes fixed only on the little boy, now carrying both their name. Lee asked Elcott regarding Jameson. The baby yawned, his tiny mittened hand brushing Naomi's cheek, and she smiled through the swirl of emotion still flooding her. "But you were born for me," she whispered, glancing down at him. "But you were born for me." Elijah stepped beside her, placing a gentle hand on Eliah's back. "And for me," he said softly. They didn't need more words. Later that week, the cafe reopened, not just as a diner, but as something reborn. The sign above the door now read, "Little Legacy." The menu hadn't changed much. Naomi still made her grandmother's cinnamon rolls, and the coffee was still too strong. But tucked in the back was a new bookshelf, filled with children's books. A mural stretched across the side wall, depicting a winding road, a cafe glowing with warm light, and a small baby cradled in open arms. Inside the garden, Elias toddled through the grass, giggling as he chased a butterfly. Naomi laughed, kneeling in the grass to catch him just before he could topple into a flower pot. Her laughter echoed in the open air, more vibrant than it had been in months. Then a familiar sound stirred from behind her, soft melodic notes drifting into the sunlight. She turned. Elijah stood by the gate with a violin in his hands, the one Sophia had once played, the one he'd nearly forgotten. He smiled. "You said you missed music." Naomi walked to him, her heart too full to speak. "I never played much," Elijah admitted, "but I'm learning, because you taught me that some things, some people, are worth learning for." Naomi reached out and placed her fingers gently over his on the bow. "Together?" she whispered. He nodded. They began to play, clumsily at first, off-key in moments, but slowly, something beautiful bloomed between the notes. Elias clapped and squealed, a rhythm of joy. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow over the garden, the cafe, the little family who had found each other in the most unexpected way. Near the cafe window, Mara lowered her camera with a smile. She turned to the intern beside her. "No headline's ever going to capture what happened here," she said, "but maybe that's the point. Some stories you just feel." And for those watching, one last message appeared on screen. Who was the woman in the photo Naomi never got to meet? Find out in the next emotional chapter.